Hi, folks. Welcome to Tuesday's podcast, videocast. I've got Stuart Lockhead and Jimmy Hutton with me today, just for a change. I'm Norris Stewart. We're going to start with the presser because its scope's quite wide and it's going to cover most of what we want to talk about. But I think Brexit's going to get a mention at the end. Stuart, you weren't happy with the introduction to the presser today.
No, not at all. They have it's very short. It's a minute and a half, and they always get cut out. The First Minister comes into the room and that's it. They've got to stop talking. But the BBC introduced the press briefing about, they claimed that the Scottish Government contacting quarantined incoming people from wherever and on airplanes was 4 weeks late going into action. They're 4 months late. 4 months late introducing the quarantine scheme. So it's like they're framing the issue with their introduction. It's biased, and it's a biased introduction by the BBC.
Aye, they're framing it in a way that suits London completely.
Aye.
But that argument's already been lost.
Which one? 4 weeks late.
The argument about testing people who are coming into the country. Effectively, the Scottish Government did what they're supposed to do. They obeyed the rules and they went through the process. The Home Office obeyed the rules and went through the process.
Aye, but I'm not actually.
There's no quick way to get there.
Yeah, we're not talking about testing, or I'm talking about quarantining. They didn't bring in quarantining until 4 weeks ago. They should have brought it in 4 months ago.
Oh, you mean, yeah, right, sorry.
Yeah.
Aye, and that was a political choice not to bring it in, and then a strange political choice to then bring it in when we're past the peak of the pandemic in the UK, and it looks more and more like the reason that they brought it in was to then force other countries to sign up to these air bridges things that England are desperate for. So we, Nigel and Sonia, can take the two kids to Spain for a couple of weeks of COVID over there.
Isn't he good sometimes at summing things up?
Yes. I think it was, as Jimmy says, public pressure. I want to go on my holidays. Oh, that'll be some more votes for us, say the Tories. Let's forget about public health and let everybody go on holiday wherever they want.
Yep.
Right.
Which is really good for the economy because everybody will fly away to Spain and spend their money in Spain.
Well, that's for further down the line. We've got another wee go at that.
Right, okay.
Absolutely, aye. I thought Nicola had done pretty well today again. A couple of the questions, the boy for the Times in particular, I think it was Matt McLaughlin or something like that. But he was basically trying to trip her up. Clearly, he wanted to push her onto talking about devolution, but she's just not going to go there, you know. It seemed to me that question had been top of his email list this morning from Conservative Central Officer Jackson Carlow. So if she answered the question, they could then say, hold it, that's a bit political. Let's think again about these daily briefings. But she spotted that straight away, bent the guy over and slapped him on the ass with his own question.
It was the question was a bit like, when did you stop beating your wife? And it was very tempting because John Curtis had said something nice.
Aye.
And positive about the SNP and the First Minister and the Scottish Government. So it must have been very tempting. The word crafted come into my brain there thinking about that question. But no, she totally scalped the guy, McLaughlin. He got a belter.
Mm-hmm.
It was very nicely done, considering the Scottish Tories are doing it, trying to present the daily briefing as a political, SNP political slot, which is very dangerous. Very dangerous. It's the place where the message is first put out by the Scottish Government about what's going on. And if you want to stop people watching it, what does that say about your attitude to public health in Scotland?
Exactly. It totally undermines the public health message. I mean, today we got proof positive, or we can take it proof positive anyway, that test and protect works well in Scotland, because the Dumfries and Galloway incident appears very much to be contained. They've lifted travel restrictions that were imposed only 4 days ago. So again, it's a good news story for Scotland. Admittedly, it's a good news story for the Scottish Government, but I'd argue that it's a good news story for the entirety of Scotland. We have a test and protect system that appears to work exactly as they told us it would.
The other thing I really liked about her statement at the beginning, before the questions, was when she thanked the people that self-isolated.
Mm-hmm.
She thanked the test and trace teams and everything, but she didn't forget the poor sods that have locked themselves away for a fortnight for the benefit of the community.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think that's the difference. I can't see Boris Johnson standing up and saying to Leicester, "Oh, and I'd like to thank all the folk that locked themselves up for 14 days." He's more likely to say, "Oh, and it's okay, guys, we're going to open the pubs."
Aye. Or if he did stand up and say thank you to the people of Leicester, you would know he didn't mean it, mate. You would know that somebody had tacked that onto his speech after Dominic Cummings had written his speech for them, because somebody would have went, hold it. The public might need a wee bit of reassurance and a wee clap here, because that's not what Boris or Dominic think.
Well, I was delighted, as I think we'll all agree, that the test and trace worked. And in a shorter period, I mean, that's only been a week, and she's able to let up on the travel because they've contacted everybody they need to, and the people are self-isolating.
Exactly. I mean, as you said, mate, she also thanked the two big companies, 2 big employers down there where there were no cases, but they said, and you get into our factories and test all our staff now. And the whole thing worked beautifully, and it worked as a community-based public health attempt at keeping us safe should work. Everybody worked together, they worked well, and it looks like it's, as I say, it looks like it's done exactly what it says in the tin.
Good stuff. Can I suggest we have a wee symbolic round of applause for all those who locked down in Dumfries and Galloway?
You did very well. It would be very difficult. You've just got to tell. You talk to somebody, for 5 minutes in the butcher's, and now you've got to self-isolate for a fortnight.
Yeah.
It must be quite tricky. She actually, I'd forgotten, she had actually 4 different items that she talked about before she took questions. Usually they're big announcements, but the 4th one was about, she's backing up her position on being very cautious about easing the lockdown. And she's referenced Australia, where Melbourne, they've had to reintroduce a 6-week lockdown. So I've just spoke to my son a couple of hours ago. They're back where they were 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, before they started easing, which is more or less the same as we were with a full lockdown.
I think it's noticeable, Stuart, that she does mention quite frequently where we are getting things right and we need to stay cautious and keep on that path, and then points out other places like Australia, like particularly America at the moment. What's happening in America, and the fact that the president of America is almost effectively turning a blind eye to that is a national scandal. And hopefully that will be the absolute final nail in the coffin of his presidency, although his niece's book looks like banging a couple of the nails in.
I think the saddest thing about all this is going to be the only way she's going to be able to justify the Scottish Government's decision is when things go wrong elsewhere.
Well, somebody tried to bite her to get her to say something about that today, and I forget who it was, part of the presser.
Well, if they start having to lock down businesses again south of the border.
Actually, no, I think it was on Twitter.
Which they already have, Norrie.
They accused her of wanting a second peak just to prove herself right.
But I mean, they already have. There's a handful of pubs. Sorry, mate. There's a handful of pubs in England that have already had to close because they've had positive cases from people that have been in there over the weekend when the pubs were open in England. So I couldn't tell you numbers, but it's about at least half a dozen that I've seen so far online that have had to put out announcements telling people, by the way, go and get yourself tested because we've got a punter that's been in here that has proved positive.
Did we?
And I think that the really sad thing about that is that will be headlined as Sturgeon gloats.
Aye.
You know,
It's no gloating at all. It's
because she did a better job.
aye. And
Did we make any reference yesterday to the rammie at the border? Just
we did, yeah.
Briefly, yeah.
it would appear that with a little more time passing, that it wasn't much of a rammie, and they weren't nationalists. They were just wanting to keep the virus out of Scotland. And as I've got plenty unionist friends and relatives in Scotland here that have the same opinion as the people that went to the border on Sunday.
I'm trying to find it at the moment, but I can't. There was an interesting tweet from the Herald newspaper. I can't remember the exact words they used, but effectively it was nationalist agitators closed the border.
How do you, what an absolute ridiculous misrepresentation of what went on.
They had a wee protest in. There's a huge lay-by there with a coffee stall. Everybody must know it. And the guy used "fuck" to a camera. I mean, we use that as a regular adjective in Scotland, as Billy Connolly has told us 100 times. It's normal in Scotland.
Well,
it was a massive overreaction by Humza Yousaf and Jill Martin in particular, who really need to hang their heads in shame. If they're going to be goaded by unionist press and by unionist tweets to overreact in such a manner, they should both be spending some considerable time on the back benches relearning how to be a front bench spokesman for the Scottish National Party.
Well, we mentioned
it's making a lot of mistakes, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Humza's slipped off his pedestal.
He's gone. He seems to be going for a record the number of car crashes in 1 week. He's having to apologise to Parliament. Is it today or tomorrow? I think he's going to have to apologise to Parliament for basically talking a load of nonsense to them.
Well, she mentioned that today actually when she supported him. What was it? The 20th of June. He'd said to a committee in Parliament that the
checks
testing on quarantined people from flights was taking place, and it wasn't.
Well, it's contact tracing. It's rather
no
testing involved.
So, anything else out the presser?
Oh, aye. There's my bee in my bonnet today. The bee in my bonnet. With the boy on from Global, which is a radio group. That's another issue altogether. A guy called Phil McDowell. He got his first medal from me as a hyena. Loaded question. He was asking about Barrhead Travel and how they might have to close down. And so what they needed was a bit, but basically he's moaning about how slow the Scottish government is about deciding about these air bridges so that people can book their holidays to go abroad. It was a very loaded question, but what really annoys me is Barrhead Travel. Any money you give to Barrhead Travel, 99% of it goes to Spain. They should be thinking about the incoming tourists, not people flying off to the Mediterranean. We need the money in Scotland. It's our home tourist business that needs support, not Spanish hotels.
But that's one of the problems with these air bridges. Nobody seems to have thought about this. We should let anybody come to this country that's got no COVID. Whether they let us go to their country or not is irrelevant. We shouldn't let anybody in that's got high COVID.
We should let Chinese
and whether they let us in or not doesn't matter.
Now let the Chinese tourists in. They're the second highest payers. They're much after the Americans. They're much politer. They're much better informed, and they're much cleaner.
Well, they're not much cleaner, mate. They eat bats.
No, the ones that can afford to come to Scotland, Jimmy.
Exactly.
Aye, very true. You're probably right, mate. I just the whole Barrhead Travel thing, mate. It's come about because Barrhead Travel, in particular, the owners of Barrhead Travel are unionists and came out and said quite a few nasty things about independence in the SNP in 2014.
Barrhead Travel was the guy that sent a letter to all his employees telling them to vote no.
Aye.
that simple. I mean, there's no
And let's
black,
be honest,
white, or grey areas here.
And let's think about that as well, Norrie. If Barrhead Travel goes tits up, it's a travel agency. Most of the people are very well trained who will lose their jobs. They'll be re-employed by whoever takes over Barrhead Travel, or a significant percentage of them will.
Or lifts their customers, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But as Stuart says, I encourage internal tourism, encourage people coming to this country. I didn't necessarily, I'll be honest with you, mate, I didn't think many Scots people were desperate to jump on a plane. The ones that are, hell mend them. There's no danger I'm getting on a plane this year.
Well,
This virus still floating about.
Stuart's point is really relevant here. We should let people who are not infected or whatever come into the country, and people who might be infected because they've got high COVID rates can't come into the country. And we shouldn't let anybody out.
And I'm going to be controversial here, gentlemen. I'd rather have a busload of Chinese tourists than a busload of hens or stags from England arrive.
That's just because you're old and grumpy.
Okay, I'll go with the stags, but the hens are always welcome, mate. Don't tell my wife I said that.
No, we're starting to sound like three grumpy old men again. I would point out that this virus least affects the health of the young, but most affects the lives of the young. And they've stepped through many hoops that society has put in front of them, i.e. they've been happy to lock down, most of them, when they were very unlikely to catch COVID. And they're getting no thanks for it, because if we come out again, we're going to start talking about Brexit, and we're going to start talking about rebuilding the economy, and nobody's going to rebuild the economy where the young work.
Well, they can go and pick fruit.
Oh,
why would you insist that people under the age of 30 go and pick fruit when you wouldn't do it yourself?
Wait a minute. Hands up everybody here that's picked tatties.
Oh, aye.
No, but...
Hands up everybody here that went grouse beating.
Wasn't me.
Hands up everybody here that worked on a farm during the holidays.
No, why would I go and work on a farm, mate?
Look, I've washed dishes.
I was brought up in the city, Norrie. You were brought up in the boondocks, mate.
What was your summer job, Jimmy?
My summer job was running about like a bam, trying to get bevy and sell underage, mate.
Oh, we did that as well. We didn't have to run about like bams. We just had the odd part. Every town in the borders had a bar that would serve you underage.
No, I had to run about Edinburgh finding the ones, mate. God, there weren't that many in the city back in my time.
Right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about Brexit. I know. Cheer yourselves up. But mostly because I've got a really good clip that sums up what I believe the situation is. So here we go.
Mm-hmm.
Where is he? Here he is.
There's no negotiations. There's no negotiations simply because the British position is to say we don't want the backstop and we don't want the backstop. Counter proposal? Nothing. So basically they say come back with something that pleases us. That's not a negotiation, so they are not negotiating.
So when he is saying that there are intense negotiations going on and that they're making progress, is that a lie?
I think it's a lie. It's not because, well, you send a couple of people to Brussels to sip coffee together that you have negotiations. Negotiations is putting options on the table, negotiating the details and trying to forge agreement. He's not interested in an agreement. What he's interested in is giving the illusion that he negotiates in good faith with bad people. And that ultimately, if there's disorder, if there's disruption because of no-deal Brexit, well, you know, I tried, but these bloody Europeans can't really negotiate.
When you look at the politics in London, are you filled with despair or hope at the moment?
Well, rather hope, actually, because there's clarification within the Tory party. Now we know that this has become an English nationalist party, a Brexit party, not really better than Farage's party.
Is that the way you see it?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a clarification. English nationalist party, they claim to be, well, to defend the United Kingdom in all its parts, etc. This is rubbish. They are not. They are English nationalists, and they want hard Brexit. They want a no-deal Brexit to happen.
So there you are, out of the European horse's mouth.
Right.
Yeah, the only thing I've got to say about that is I'm not quite sure whether there's much. What's the difference? I'll ask you guys. No, you first. What's the difference between an English nationalist and a British nationalist?
British nationalist actually understands there are 3 other countries in the Union. An English nationalist doesn't even care.
What about you, Jimmy? Do you agree with that?
It's probably about right, mate. If you ask me for the technical difference, I'd probably say a fag paper between both of them.
I'm thinking that myself that the term English nationalist, I think he probably chose it carefully so as not to offend Scotland and Northern Ireland and maybe even Wales. Plus, he might have had in the back of his mind, 20 years ago, English football hooligans were the worst football hooligans in Europe.
I think there'll be some Italians who maybe not too happy with that one. They're nutcases, so they don't matter anyway. But it's more and more obvious, you know, the plan, which I think they were surprised they won the Brexit referendum. But the plan, I think, always has been no deal.
But it's this idiocy that they still seem to persist in, that they're going to get preferential treatment because Britain's this huge market and the Germans need to sell thousands of BMWs and Mercedes into Britain every year. One, Mercedes and BMW don't need to sell thousands of cars here every year. They sell millions worldwide. Two, the British buying public are not going to buy British motor cars because we don't make them. And the stuff we do make doesn't have British badges on it. They have been buying Beamers and Mercs for years because they want Beamers and Mercs. So we'll still have to import these things regardless of whatever deal we end up with. But we cannot force the German hand on that.
Is there any British car companies at all now? Range Rovers are German now, are they not?
No, they're Indian.
They're virtually all foreign, aren't they?
I think they're Indian Land Rover. Jaguar Land Rover is Indian.
What was the iconic British company that was it not BMW that bought it?
British Leyland.
Mini.
The Mini.
The Mini got bought by BMW. Rolls-Royce went to
somebody. Somebody European.
Anyway, they all went abroad.
Well, you never know. We might have a company building Boris bangers shortly.
You get a Morgan. They might be British.
You can get that's the only ones that we make, small batch handmade vehicles like TVR have gone down the tubes now, right enough, but Morgan's one of them. Ariel. There's a few wee companies out there, but they're banging out about a few hundred motors a year at most.
Right.
And let's be honest, with no deal, we will watch Sunderland close because
the Japanese have said that.
The Japanese have said that consistently. If it's a no deal, Sunderland shuts, and Sunderland won't be the only one.
Well, how tremendous. But that'll be because of coronavirus, will it not?
Unfortunately,
it depends on whose point of view you're asking for.
I think Boris will maybe try and get away with saying that it's because of coronavirus, but they've been warned, mate. They've been warned since 2014, 2015. Sorry, when Cameron decided that he was going to give them this vote, they were warned then by the Japanese that if we are not part of the European Union, the Japanese would have no problem in shutting their plants here because the only reason they built them was to sell cars into Europe.
I'd love to know what the deal was Theresa May did with them, the Japanese makers.
She must have promised them.
Shut them up.
She must have promised them something major, mate. A tariff-free motor industry or something like that to get them to shut up and to get them to make. I mean, come on, they've helped the government here. They've made announcements that they will build more models at Sunderland if they get a deal. They've helped the government.
It's got more complicated with the coronavirus because the coronavirus emergency has meant the shutdown of car plants in France, particularly the nationally owned Renault Group, and the Renault Group has a major stake in Nissan, which runs the plant in Sunderland. It's all a bit complicated.
Hmm.
Aye, because they're going to build a couple of Renault models in Sunderland if we've got a deal.
So it appears that there are no meaningful negotiations going on at all.
None.
No, there's just not going to be a deal, mate. There's going to be and they keep telling you, that's fine. We'll go to WTO rules. We'll go to WTO rules. WTO
Sorry,
rules makes most of what we produce in this country too expensive for the Europeans to purchase it because of the tariffs.
I'm sorry, Jimmy. You mean the Australian deal?
Aye, Australia's not got a deal, mate. It's no deal, but they didn't want to call it no deal, so they call it the Australian deal instead. See, making me bust my computer there.
Right. I thought you'd fallen off your chair.
No,
Like
I pulled
the
my
t-shirt.
fat head too far, mate.
No, I like the T-shirt.
Cheers, mate. I thought I would point
Oh,
that out,
no.
given what's going on this week.
We're all going to have to leave the Labour Party because of Jimmy's T-shirt.
I'm not in the Labour Party, mate. It's the Scottish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. Now today with Labour.
Okay. I was just,
Teasing.
making a joke. So, anybody got anything else they'd like to talk about?
I wanted to bring a wee thing up, mate, but it's kind of gone out of my head at the moment. Just to see if I can find it.
While Jimmy's looking, I'll bring up something that struck me. That we've learned an awful lot about the Scottish press watching these press briefings for the last 3 or 4 months that we didn't know before. And today it struck me that somebody's missing. He's missing that there is one so-called left-wing British national newspaper, and that's The Guardian. And it's very rarely got anybody turns up for the press briefing.
Well, as I think I pointed out, Severin Carroll has been there. He writes for The Guardian.
Well, he's been there, but honestly, I'm prepared to go back and count. I can probably got the data here if I can be bothered to find out. But I'm pretty sure they're not turning up the same as everybody else.
Is it not a difficult position for The Guardian, being anti-independence, to turn up and criticise a Scottish government that's doing a much better job, that they should technically be supporting because they're doing a better job than Westminster?
There you go. I'm glad you've answered my question. Thank you very much.
Maybe Severin Carroll's feet were too big to keep dancing on the head of that particular pin, Norrie.
Well, Severin Carroll is no friend to the SNP, that's for sure.
No, absolutely not.
That's for sure.
I just wanted to point folk in the direction of the Boris Johnson story about care homes and his idiot comments last night, that he's not being allowed by the press to row back on, which is quite interesting that they're holding his feet to the fire on this one. But BBC News 24 are running a really heartwarming and interesting story about the staff that have been living in a care home in Somerset for the last 3 months, and they kept COVID out of that care home. And they're just coming out the day, and they were disgusted with Boris's comments last night because they seen it as an attack on them. They seen his comments as an attack on their inability to do the jobs that they were paid for.
And
So if nobody's seen it yet, go and have a butcher's at it.
Can I ask you guys a question? Because it came up on a sideways this morning. Did the government, in all that extra economic support for the workers and businesses and every other sector of the economy, did they offer any extra money to the care home staff?
They did in Scotland. I don't think the UK government matched the pay increase that the Scottish government negotiated for both local authority, charity, and also for private care home workers. They negotiated with the private care home providers so that everybody got that bump in money. I'm not sure that the UK done the same.
And it took them longer because they were dealing with private businesses to get that agreement. It was linked as well to a deal for sick pay.
Aye.
They wanted them to be paid their wages effectively.
And did we ever have a clap for the carers?
No.
I think they got that got inveigled in after we'd been clapping for the NHS for 2 or 3 weeks. They then extended it to include the carers because they realised it was a bit of a PR faux pas not to include the carers.
As I said earlier, I've got this fantasy goes on in my head that every day Dominic Cummings calls Boris Johnson into his office and dictates what he's going to say to the press. And it basically is, right, Boris, today, I want you to look at what Jackson Carlos said in the last 24 hours and say the opposite. Because Jackson Carlos' position in Scotland has been it's all the Scottish government's fault, care homes. And for Boris to walk out and say, well, actually, no, it's all the people that work in care homes' fault, is diametrically opposed to the story that Jackson Carlo would like in the press.
Well, I was sitting watching Alok Sharma this morning, and Alok's brilliant, absolutely brilliant at following whatever line Dominic Cummings has given to him. And he was on Kay Burley this morning, and about 6 times in a row she got him to try and kind of criticise Johnson's comments last night. And all he would do was basically run the clarification that 10 Downing Street put out last night, which clearly Dominic Cummings gave to Downing Street for his house on a mobile phone. This is the line we're going with. And Alok he repeated the same line about 6 times this morning to Kay Burley. And I mean, Kay Burley's not exactly my favourite person, but even she was laughing with derision at what the hoops that Sharma, the contortions he was making to get the line.
It's actually quite good fun watching them going back to politics. They might not be very good at dealing with pandemics, but they're not that good at politics either, these monkeys.
Nah. Well, that's the problem, mate. When you pick monkeys and you feed them peanuts, you're going to get the idiot response that monkeys give.
Well, don't forget,
he's one of the best at just following the line regardless.
But don't forget, they think they're good. They actually think they're good at politics because they won a referendum and a general election. But they only won by criminal corruption.
They're good at winning campaigns by any means.
Well, they're good at criminals. They're good at being criminals.
Aye, but if you win a campaign, you've got to run a government. Who was it? Jonathan Pill that was on. Remember Tony Blair's chief of staff, Jonathan Pill. He was on Newsnight last week pointing out that trying to run a government by campaigning has never ever worked. And they very nearly made a complete hash of everything in 1998 by trying to run the government as a campaign.
Yeah.
Fortunately, Alistair Campbell and Powell were wide enough between the two of them to go, hold it, this isn't working, and make changes. And let's be honest, whether you supported them or not, that was a relatively successful Labour government for the first few years.
Well, I just hope that Dom wakes up one day with an epiphany and joins the SNP, starts fighting for Scottish independence.
I hope he wakes up one day with a massive Specsavers advert next to him in his fucking bed, mate.
Okay, guys, unless anybody has anything to finish with. No, that's Tuesday done and dusted for us then. Thanks, Jimmy Hutton. Thanks, Stuart Lockhead.
I'll say bye-bye now.
I'm Norrie Stewart, and we'll catch up with you on Wednesday, which is PMQs. Something to look forward to, chaps.
Is it a double bill?
Don't think so. She's got a statement to Parliament on Thursday, has our Nicola. Parliament's shut at the moment, technically.
Yeah, but they did say that although when they were in recess, she would still come into Parliament and make the legally mandated update, the 3-week update thing for how things are going.
That's our Parliament in Scotland, for those of you who are getting confused. Westminster's still open. Anyway, cheers. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll no doubt have more news for you tomorrow. Cheers for now.